This episode is brought to you by the Newman Center for the Performing Arts. Friday, February 16th, the Newman Center brings you Small Island, Big Song, a collaboration of artists of the Pacific and Indian Oceans together in music, spoken word, and film. The work confronts the impacts of climate change framed in a theatrical narrative with panoramic visuals of the artists' featured homelands. See Small Island, Big Song, Friday, February 16th. Tickets available now at newmancenterpresents.com or by calling 303-871-7720. Today on CityCast Denver, there is a quiet revolution happening in the world of museums. All across the country, curators are closing down exhibits interpreting Native American objects and culture. The Biden administration hastened the change with new federal guidelines issued last month, but here in Denver, we've been ahead of the curve. So we're pleased to share an episode me and producer Paul Caroli recorded last June when we walked through the Denver Museum of Nature and Science with friend of the show Joshua Emerson to learn about why this is happening now and why it matters. Today is Wednesday, February 7th. I'm Bree Davies, and here's what Denver's talking about.
My name is Chris Petrella. I'm the curator of anthropology here at DMNS, and we are about to walk into the North American Indian Cultures Hall.
Cool.
Which is closing very soon.
Yes.
How soon?
Yeah, do we have a date?
The last day that it will be open is June 15th.
Which is Thursday.
So this week?
Yes, it is closing this week.
Wow. Okay, good to know.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's go in.
So the hall originally opened in 1978, and there have been modest updates to it since then, but there are areas of it that remain largely unchanged. And this is one of the newer areas of it where we have this film, which is actually, if you remember the commercial that the National Congress of American Indians aired during the Super Bowl about changing the Washington football team's mascot. So this is a version of that kind of, interacts with this map of North America in front of this display of moccasins from various tribal nations in North America. So this is new-ish, but I think there are still, significant areas of the entire space that need to be completely rethought. So yeah.
Teacher, doctor, soldier, Seminole, Seneca, Mohawk, and Creek.
Paul and I are white folks. There's no way we could understand how this exhibit comes off to Indigenous people. So we invited along Josh Emerson. He's a comedian and a member of the Denver American Indian Commission. Joshua, can I ask you how you feel when you walk in here?
It's definitely interesting. So I heard Navajo as we walked in. So it's cool to hear my language, like in a place like this. The moccasins, I didn't quite pick up. I can see they're from. I guess there's other things you could have used instead of moccasins, but this. This isn't the part that bugs me. It's the later part that
Sure.
So,
but the moccasins, I think, one of the things that a display such as this does is it kind of makes it seem like all moccasins are created the same way, and there's very culturally specific ways of not only designing and decorating moccasins. There's different terms used for footwear. Not everybody calls them moccasins. In fact, moccasin is an imposed term. And even this, which is relatively new, is also a little bit challenging for those reasons.
We knew going into this tour that some of the most problematic aspects of the hall were the dioramas depicting humans. So when we saw the first one, everyone had a lot to say.
Yeah, so I'm Dene. I'm Navajo. I'm Tlashit, born for the Bilagana. For me, especially this image right here.
The woman weaving.
The woman weaving right here on the rug. Some people still dress like that. There's a lot of traditional aspects to what she's wearing, and for Dene culture, everything is so intentional with like the siete, that's like the hair bun, and like the way she's like wearing her earrings. But there's also like a sense of like, I was at the NBA championship game last night, and so the idea that Dene people live in a modern context, that's always been like the biggest thing, is that this is like a part of our heritage, like all of this, but like even this like beautiful jewelry over here, Del Galito, he's the one that brought it to the Navajo. It's adapted from another culture. Even weaving in the first place, we adapted from another culture. Navajos are very adaptive to the world around them, and continue to be. As a part of our identity, and so at least that's the way. That's something that I take personally. And so that I think when I first came, because I came in here with some of my friends, and walking in here, that was what was most striking in terms of like seeing a version of my culture, but it's also just a part of it, you know what I mean? And not even like the full story, and not contextualized in a contemporary context. And that's very important to me, because indigenous issues, like there are Supreme Court cases that are being decided this month that are going to affect what sovereignty is. And we need like empathy and support, and also people just to know our issues in a modern way.
And I think creating spaces where people can speak about their own experiences, rather than an institution telling people what is or isn't important about a cultural practice, I think is critical moving forward, right? So you don't hear very much from Dene people in this section. It's a sort of it's an imposed narrative from the institution.
Also, that door should be facing east to greet the sun.
Yep.
It felt like every display we walked past, either Chris or Josh would point out some detail, like that wrong-facing door or some major missing piece of context. And that's kind of how Chris described why they're closing this hall, too. He said that there were, quote, significant and pervasive problems related to conservation, design, contextualization, and interpretation. In other words, everything a museum is supposed to do.
I mean, I think if you wanted to boil it down to one thing, is that the community collaboration that went into this in 1978 at the time may have constituted best practices for collaboration, but a lot has changed since 1978. And, I think that not only responding to best practices today, but hopefully being a place where new best practices are formed. So not only are we responding to them, but in some modest way contributing to new ways of forming relationships and collaborating and co-creating in the future, I think is the ultimate goal. But I don't think there's any one thing that you can point to that's, underlying it all. I mean, I think it's sort of, it's time. It's 45 years. That's a long time for even a permanent exhibition hall to be open.
In those 45 years, millions of people like you and me have come through this hall and absorbed this problematic message. But perhaps the most complicated thing here is the diorama depicting a Cheyenne family living on the banks of Sand Creek. It's a landscape that would feel familiar to all Denverites. High plains, cottonwoods, mountains in the background.
Josh, how do you feel when you walk into a museum and see this diorama?
There's a sense that they're trapped in time,
Right.
and there's like a real like sadness about that. The braids are tight, I will say that. Yeah, tight braids means good morals. That's what I was always taught. Especially because she looks so happy, right? And he looks so happy, as they're playing this game, but it's also there's so much context to being indigenous, to being Cheyenne, and the fact that we're in Denver, the confluence is not too far away, it's sacred, and that there are no sovereign lands around here. It's for a reason, right? It's definitely especially because like Sand Creek, under a peace treaty, and it was elders and women, and so when you see like this, elders and women, and
It's just not telling that story. Right.
and so like this could have been at Sand Creek, you know, and then like the 3rd Regiment just rides in with a Gatling gun, and so it's I guess complicated feelings. It is hard for me to like sort of put into words, but a general sense of uneasiness about it, especially just that they are sort of frozen.
That's the thing that I struggle with too, is that I feel like it puts Indigenous people in history and not in the present moment.
Right.
And it doesn't do that with other people in the museum. But I know, Chris, you are newer to this position at the museum. What did you think when you first saw this?
I thought it was outdated. And I think that there's been a long history within the fields of art history and anthropology rooted in community collaboration that has pretty much set the record straight about the problematic and fraught nature of dioramas in general. And I think that is something that we absolutely need to address. And I think it would be great to continue working with the descendants of the people who worked on this diorama, as well as the people who are still living, who are in this diorama, about what the next steps should look like. I think it's important to honor their voices and their perspectives on all of this as well.
Like the people who were modeled, who these
who made some of these things, who gave them to the museum for the diorama. What do they want to see happen to that stuff? I think that those are all important conversations to have. Yeah. And we've begun them, but I don't want to speak on behalf of anybody. So
sure.
This episode is brought to you by Visit Denver. Visit Denver's Denver Restaurant Week, presented by Superior Farms American Lamb, runs March 1st through the 10th. Check out hundreds of the Mile High's best restaurants at an affordable price. Going 20 years strong, this annual celebration of our culinary scene invites you to enjoy delicious offerings across the city with appealing price points of $25, $35, $45, or just $55 per person. Bree Davies is going to try different restaurants that are not any of the same 5 she always goes to. For a full list of participating restaurants, visit denverrestaurantweek.com. That's denverrestaurantweek.com. Hey, it's Bree Davies, host of CityCast Denver. Growing up in Denver, it took me a while to find my place in the city. I wanted to understand our city's politics better and how they impacted things like the arts community, which is where my heart is. That's why the mission of CityCast Denver speaks to me. We spend all day, every day, finding the most compelling stories, the most exciting people, and the best insider recommendations so you can make the most of the city and also make the city better. Members of CityCast Denver make that possible, and we could not keep doing this work without you. Become a member of CityCast Denver today at membership.citycast.fm and get exclusive perks like ad-free listening, event invites, and members-only updates. That's membership.citycast.fm. Thanks. One of the things that just blew my mind came up when we were standing in front of a diorama depicting a Seminole family in Florida. We were talking about where all these materials in the displays came from, because it's not like museum employees went out and made some survey of Indigenous people and collected a statistically accurate sampling of their lives and experiences. All the clothing, the animal hides, the jewelry, the weapons, and the kitchenware were collected by a wealthy New England couple named Mary and Francis Crane.
They got the collecting bug in the 1950s, started collecting Indigenous art and material culture from primarily North America, and decided to try and open up their own museum in Marathon, Florida. And perhaps unsurprisingly, it didn't get the same traction that they had hoped. So they decided to, through mutual connections, donate the collection to what was then called the Denver Museum of Natural History, now the Denver Museum of Nature and Science.
This conversation happening inside DMNS is part of a broader change in museums across the country, too. Chris told us that all this momentum towards better representation, curation, conservation, and collaboration related to Indigenous communities has really picked up in the last 12 months.
And then in terms of the conversation picking up momentum, like, have Indigenous people been a part of that conversation?
Sure. So really when I started, I kind of came into this process a little bit midstream, like maybe right after it started. We're working with a group of consultants led by Donna Christian. And we basically wanted to answer two questions, or a few questions. What do people like about the hall? What don't people like about the hall? And should we have a hall at all? So we did a number of listening sessions with Indigenous youth, sort of school-aged kids, young professionals, elders, college students, mostly from Metro State and some of the other, sort of student groups in Denver. And I think the big takeaway was it's important to have a hall. It's important for people to be able to learn this history, but to do it in a way that is inclusive of contemporary voices. And I think that's kind of the basis, among many other things, for the decision to close the hall and completely reimagine it.
Yeah, because there's an image over here, right, of Indian boarding school. That was, my mom went to Indian boarding school. All my uncles and aunts went to Indian boarding school, and the trauma that they suffered, it affects my relationship with them now, in terms of how they understand, corporal punishment, or even just their own Indigenous identity being shamed for it or punished for it, and so it's I mean, like I said, I'll say it over and over again, we exist in a modern context, and some of the traumas, are hundreds and hundreds of years old, but I experience them, and our generation experienced them, and part of healing is acknowledging and part of getting a buy-in from non-natives that all of this hurts. It hurts. And to not even have it discussed, it makes you crazy. It feels like you're being gaslit by the people around you, especially at a culture institution where you're supposed to be able to learn, when this is what they're saying, this is what you should learn about natives. That's tough. It's tough.
DMNS has shuttered the hall as of today, June 15th. And Chris says the next step is to start the deinstallation process, which is no small feat. Materials from more than 140 tribal nations are represented in the hall. So the institution will attempt to engage with all these communities to try to make sure the materials are conserved, exhibited, or repatriated in the right way.
So it closes this week.
Yep.
Okay. No time set for when it will reopen, right?
No,
Not yet. Okay.
No. I mean, I think one of the benefits of not having an opening date is that we can do this dialogically, right? And do it in conversation with people, even as we begin to deinstall, and not letting an arbitrary timeline dictate the pace of that is actually an asset in this particular instance.
And that work that y'all are going to start to embark on is, I don't want to say radical, because I think it should have been started a long time ago, but it is really cool that it is starting, I guess, and sort of finding out how you want to reimagine that with native buy-in and for the Denver community at all. I'm really excited for you, I guess. I mean, it's got to be such a great opportunity to sort of contribute to a community in such a strong way.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hope. It is really exciting, and it's exciting to be here at this particular moment in time. And it's a huge responsibility that, we definitely don't take lightly. And, we very much think of this as the beginning of something and not the end of something. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and Josh, I hope you continue to be involved. I hope this is the start of continued involvement. We would, that'd be great.
Donna's got my number.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. This was great.
You can see photos from the now closed North American Indian Cultures Hall on our Instagram at CityCast Denver. If you, like me, only remembered those weird dioramas from school field trips. Also, we want to hear from you. What has been your experience with dioramas like these? I want to hear your school field trip stories. And if there are other weird dioramas around Denver we should be talking about, or similar exhibits where you grew up, text or leave us a voicemail at the Nature and Science Hotline at 720-500-5418. Again, that number is 720-500-5418. That's all for today here on CityCast Denver. If you enjoyed this show, why not take a minute to tell a real living person about us? Rate the show wherever you get your podcasts and subscribe to our morning newsletter and learn more about us at denver.citycast.fm. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye-bye. I mean, it was like me, my 2.5-year-old, and my husband, and then like 10, 22-year-old people vaping, having a great time. But like, do you have to do it at the puppet show? It's only 10 minutes long. Like, go do it in the caves. Like, go do it in the mining section or something. Do it during Sorcero. The lights are off.